She spread a rumor that I slept with my boss. At Gate C12, I didn't scream. Everyone heard her lie, but while she was talking, I was preparing the truth. And when it finally came out, she couldn't even breathe. My name is Liana. I'm 29 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The smell of cinnamon pretzels always takes me back to that day, that moment, that gate, Gate C12, where everything shifted, where I learned how humiliation can burn and how silence can become your greatest weapon. Outside, Nashville was heavy with humidity, the kind that makes your hair stick to your neck and your blouse cling to your back. Inside the terminal, it was the opposite, a refrigerated box of buzzing air conditioning, whirring vents, and that faint chemical smell of floor polish mixed with airport coffee. The lighting was too bright, white, and flat, washing everyone into the same shade of waiting. I remember the hum of boarding announcements blending with footsteps, a child whining near the window, the hollow, nervous laughter of people on phone calls they didn't want others to overhear. It was a weekday morning, though you wouldn't have known it by looking. Every gate was packed with stories about to scatter across states. And then there was me, standing at Gate C12, backpack over one shoulder, the fabric strap cutting slightly into my skin, my boarding pass folded neatly between two fingers, my pulse steady, even as I scanned the crowd. That's when I saw her. Jessa, my ex-roommate, my ex-best friend, and the person who once swore she'd always have my back. The same woman who'd later twisted the knife without blinking. She looked exactly the same. Hair in that effortless loose bun she pretended didn't take 40 minutes, lipstick too perfect for a travel day, nails freshly done in some neutral shade called trustworthy beige. We hadn't spoken since that office retreat, the one in Asheville, where the hotel smelled like cedar and lies. I still remember how she cornered me in the bathroom mirror's reflection, her eyes wide, voice honey-sweet, her words sliding out with fake innocence. I just want to make sure we're not competing, you know? I had smiled then, not because I believed her, but because I knew she wanted me to react, to show fear or insecurity or both. So I gave her a smile sharp enough to cut through the perfume fog she lived in. But at Gate C12, there was no perfume, just recycled air and the metallic echo of rolling suitcases. And Jessa didn't whisper this time. She didn't even wait for the right moment. She just dropped her words into the world like a grenade. She only got promoted because she slept with the boss. No hesitation, no warning, just venom, pure and unfiltered, released into the terminal like it belonged there. Her tone was deceptively casual, soft enough to sound like gossip, loud enough to make sure it landed. It was the kind of line that didn't need proof, just oxygen. And the gate was full of it. Heads turned. A woman across the aisle gasped, her hand freezing halfway to her coffee cup. A teenager snickered into his phone. The man beside me pulled one earbud out, curiosity lighting his face like he'd been given free entertainment. Even the gate agent looked up, blinking, and I stood there, completely still, not because I didn't hear her, but because I wanted to remember the sound of that silence that followed her words, that small, heavy second when judgment filled the air, the moment everyone wondered if the rumor was true. I didn't flinch, didn't look at her, didn't defend myself. My expression didn't shift an inch. I'd rehearsed this moment too many times to let instinct ruin it. Instead, I let my hand slip inside my bag, fingertips brushing over papers, smooth, cold, precise. The folder I had packed that morning like a soldier loading a weapon, labeled neatly across the top tab, Verification, Corporate Award, Q3 Recognition, Borden Logistics. Beneath it lay a laminated certificate, an official press release, and an email thread that had my name printed in bold. I had triple-checked the staples, the seals, the timestamps. Proof so strong it could withstand fire. No one at Gate C12 knew that I had been waiting for this moment. For this exact gate, this exact flight, this exact crowd of strangers who would become my unwilling witnesses. The funny thing about revenge is that it's not always planned in anger. Sometimes it's prepared in silence, wrapped in calm, and served under fluorescent lighting at 8:45 a.m. My palms were dry, my heart steady. I could have shouted back, could have screamed, cried, argued, but I didn't. I had something better: truth, timing, and an audience. I walked toward the counter, slowly, deliberately. I could feel eyes following me, curious, skeptical. Jessa's laughter faltered for a split second. The gate agent looked up as I reached her, confusion softening her features. "Hi," I said, my voice even. "Can I update my travel status request?" She blinked, unsure what that meant, but nodded anyway. Her fingers began to move across the keyboard, nails clicking softly like rain. I slid the folder toward her, open just enough for the company logo to catch the light. The terminal sounds faded. The chatter, the rolling luggage, even the child's whining. It all shrank into a distant hum as the boarding screen above us flickered once. Then again, and then came the announcement. Pre-boarding for first-class passengers, those traveling under the corporate scholarship program fully funded by Borden Logistics. A short pause. Then my name. It echoed through the terminal, clear, calm, official. My name, spoken over the same intercom that had just carried Jessa's lie. Every screen from Gate C8 to C16 lit up with my picture, the photo I'd submitted weeks ago for the company highlight feature. Standing in front of the Nashville office, smiling, confident, unaware that this image would one day burn through humiliation like sunlight through fog. The company logo beside it, my name beneath. The words, Southeast Leadership Grant Recipient, Borden Logistics Q3 Corporate Award. No one in that terminal could mistake what it meant. No one could twist it. Not a rumor, not favoritism, not a scandal, proof. I turned, not to confront her, but because movement felt necessary. The air itself had changed. Conversations died mid-sentence. The man with the earbuds was now pretending to look at his phone, but wasn't scrolling. The teenager's smirk was gone. Even the woman with the coffee cup looked embarrassed, as if she'd been part of something cruel without realizing it. Jessa stood frozen. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The confidence she wore like perfume was gone. I didn't need to say a word. I walked back toward my seat, slow enough to let the sound of my footsteps carry. I didn't glance her way, but in the corner of my vision I caught it. The tiniest flinch, the way she looked down, the way her hand trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. People started whispering again. Only this time, the sound felt different. It wasn't gossip. It was shame rearranging itself across a crowd. I sat down, crossed my legs, and opened my boarding pass like it was nothing more than routine. My reflection caught in the dark glass of the terminal window. Calm, collected. The exact opposite of what she'd expected. No one was laughing now. There's this quiet humiliation that comes with being underestimated in a boardroom. It doesn't arrive all at once. It slides in quietly, like the hum of a projector that no one notices until it stops. You feel it in the way someone's hand drifts toward the remote control before you finish your point, or when a suggestion you spent 3 nights refining gets a polite nod, then reappears 10 minutes later, dressed in a deeper voice and a more expensive watch. The room claps, not for the idea, but for the echo of it. And you sit there, your smile rehearsed, your pulse pretending not to care. At Borden Logistics, I started as a route analyst. 22, fresh out of a public college in Kentucky, where I'd spent weekends in the computer lab mapping fantasy delivery networks the way other students played video games. I was obsessed with movement, how trucks, data, and timing created a choreography few people ever noticed. Delays fascinated me. One wrong turn could ripple through 3 states. To me, logistics was storytelling, just in motion. The office back then felt big, too big. I sat near the window where you could see the downtown cranes stretching over Nashville, cranes that moved slower than promotions ever did. My cubicle had a cheap plastic fern, a coffee mug that said, "Future CEO," and a sticky note from my mom reminding me to eat real meals. I still have that note. It's folded between 2 pages of my first planner, a quiet relic of a version of me that still believed hard work was loud enough to be heard. 3 years later, I became a logistics coordinator. It sounded impressive until I learned that titles in corporate America were like layers of paint, covering cracks without fixing them. Suddenly, skill wasn't the only currency. Visibility was. Who laughed with whom at the bourbon hours on Fridays? Who shared cigarettes with the directors in the back lot? Who managed to look both hardworking and harmless? I didn't play that game, not because I was above it, but because I didn't know the rules. I still drove my mom's old Ford Fiesta 45 minutes from my apartment in Antioch every morning, windshield wipers squealing like they were scolding me for being late. My glove box was full of protein bars and unpaid toll receipts. I wore flats from the clearance rack and kept a pair of heels under my desk for emergencies that never came. And for a while, that was enough. Until Jessa arrived. She came in a year after me. From Texas, she said, though her accent came and went like a marketing trick. Big laugh, big lashes, big stories about panels at South by Southwest, and brunches with industry people. Her presence filled space. People noticed her before they heard her, and by the time she spoke, they already wanted to agree. At first, I liked her. She made the office lighter. She'd swing by my cubicle with 2 iced coffees, plunk one down on my desk, and grin. "One with almond milk for the nerd," she'd tease, her bracelets jingling like applause. She asked questions, how I structured route optimization dashboards, how I handled volume overflow, how I got data to align with driver GPS logs. Her interest felt flattering. When you're the quiet one, someone's curiosity feels like oxygen, but admiration can be camouflage. Looking back, I can see the way she hovered when my reports were reviewed. How she'd lean against my desk just close enough to read my notes. How her compliments always had weight, like something being measured. Then came the internal mentoring initiative. Borden wanted to showcase 5 mid-level women for a new corporate leadership grant. Scholarship funding, travel access, executive shadowing, first-class perks. It wasn't public yet, just whispers between managers and HR leads. I overheard our director say one afternoon, "We need someone who isn't just a voice in the room, but a brain behind the engine." It felt like sunlight through glass, sudden, blinding, impossible to ignore. I poured everything into it. 12 weeks of staying late, eating cold leftovers at my desk while the janitor vacuumed around me. I built logistics models for regional disaster relief routes after the Kentucky floods, mapping real-time detours to keep medical shipments alive. When my project saved the company $88,000, I printed the report and stared at the number until it stopped feeling real. The day they called me into the main conference room, it was raining. Nashville rain, thick and unapologetic. I thought I was being let go. The director wouldn't meet my eyes at first. My heart sank so hard, I almost didn't hear the words when they came. "Congratulations, Liana. You've been selected for the Southeast Division slot." I blinked at him. "Selected for what?" He smiled, the kind of restrained corporate smile meant to hide excitement. "The Leadership Fellowship. 1 recipient per region. You're it. Keep it quiet until next quarter's announcement." I nodded, stunned, my throat tight, my hands too still on my lap. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I should have known better. In places like Borden, good news travels on 2 frequencies, official and poisoned. 2 days later, Jessa stopped by my desk. Her hair was too polished for a Wednesday. She leaned on the divider, smile wide, voice syrupy. "They're probably going to assume you and Andrew had something going on. You know how this place is." I frowned. "Andrew?" She took a slow sip from her coffee, eyes not leaving mine. "You've had a lot of closed-door sessions lately. That one lunch? People notice, Liana." Then she patted the corner of my desk like she was smoothing a wrinkle and walked away. The smell of hazelnut coffee lingered long after she left. I stared at my monitor until the numbers blurred. Andrew Wexler was the division lead. My so-called lunch with him had been a 35-minute meeting beside the vending machine, where we'd eaten sandwiches wrapped in plastic while he explained the mentorship onboarding schedule. It wasn't private. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't anything. But rumors don't need facts. They just need tone. Within days, I felt it. Slack messages went quiet when I entered threads. Conversations stopped mid-sentence in hallways. People started over-explaining things to me, like they were being polite to a ticking clock. Then came the subtle jabs. In meetings, when I presented data, Jessa would tilt her head, smile sweetly, and ask, "Did Andrew help you with that formula?" Everyone laughed, just enough to sting. On Slack, she'd type, "Lol, you're famous," after the internal memo mentioned my upcoming travel. Each time, I told myself to ignore it. That professionalism would drown her pettiness. But poison doesn't drown. It spreads. One afternoon, I found her in the break room. I'd rehearsed the question 100 times, but when it came out, it sounded smaller than I wanted. "Why are you doing this?" She didn't turn. She just rinsed her mug, her hair catching the light. "You should be thanking me," she said. "People are finally talking about you." Then she left the mug in the sink, water still running, and walked out. I stood there, hand pressed against the cold countertop, pulse thudding in my fingertips. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. That was the moment I understood. She didn't want the fellowship. She wanted the narrative. If she couldn't be chosen, she'd make sure no one believed I deserved it. I didn't cry. I didn't report her. Reporting would have turned it into gossip with paperwork. Instead, I got methodical. I printed everything: the application form, every evaluation sheet, every email between me and Andrew. I highlighted timestamps, circled approval signatures, double-checked headers. I laminated the certificate when it arrived, the Borden seal embossed and gold against the white. It felt heavier than paper should. At night, I rehearsed calm responses in the mirror, practiced steady breathing, taught myself how not to blink too fast when confronted. Revenge, I learned, wasn't rage. It was preparation. When the official fellowship announcement went public, the same people who'd whispered started congratulating me in performative tones. "So proud of you, girl. Knew you'd kill it." Their smiles were choreography. Jess's was the lead. She congratulated me, too. Her eyes sparkled, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her. That tiny tremor, that controlled bitterness pretending to be joy. I kept my voice steady. "Thanks, Jessa. I'll make sure to represent the team well." That night, I opened my laptop and filled out the travel itinerary for the mentorship conference in Phoenix. One required field asked for departure airport and gate preference. For corporate coordination, it said. Most people left it blank. I didn't. I typed Nashville, BNA, Terminal B, Gate C12. A small, meaningless choice to most. To me, it was the stage. I zipped my suitcase on the morning of the flight, the August heat pressing through my apartment windows, the cicadas outside loud enough to feel like static. The sky had that hazy orange cast that promised thunderstorms later. My reflection in the mirror looked composed, but not calm. I touched the folder one more time before sliding it into my carry-on. The laminated certificate, the press release, the emails, every piece of proof that my promotion was earned, not gifted. As I locked the door, I could almost hear her voice already. The tone she'd use, the performance she'd give. She'd spot me at the gate, tilt her head, smile wide, and say something just loud enough. She'd want the crowd. She'd want witnesses. What she didn't know was that I wanted them too. That morning, when the sun broke through the clouds and lit the tarmac like a mirror, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because I felt safe, because I finally had everything arranged, every receipt, every detail, every quiet truth sharpened to a single point. If she chose to speak, I'd let her. And I'd let the truth answer for me. Quietly, cleanly, in full view. When I walked back from the gate counter that day, everything seemed to move through syrupy air, stretched and slowed, as if the world itself wanted to savor what was happening. The sound of the announcement still hung above the crowd like a bell that hadn't stopped ringing. My name, clear and formal. The fellowship title, the company name, the funding. It all lingered, echoing across the terminal speakers, settling into the silence that followed. Screens near the coffee stand flickered, refreshing in unison. The company's press release had gone live sooner than expected. A headline glowed in blue letters against a white background. Borden Logistics, Southeast Division, Rising Women in Leadership, Scholar, Liana M. Clark. People stared, blinking at the words. A few murmured, confused at the sudden shift in energy. Moments earlier, there had been laughter and whispers and the low hum of gossip. Now it was all replaced by a kind of polite awe. The atmosphere had changed temperature. I didn't look at Jessa. I didn't need to. The air around her told me enough. Stillness where there had once been motion. Silence where there had always been sound. You can feel a person freeze before you see it. It's in the sudden way they hold their breath, in the way their phone stops moving, in the invisible line between confidence and collapse. Her body language spoke volumes, shoulders pulled tight, chin lowered just slightly, the kind of posture shift that said she wanted to disappear but couldn't, that she was suddenly aware of eyes on her and that those eyes no longer saw admiration, only recognition, the kind that stings. She didn't speak, and the absence of her voice was almost violent. The silence she left behind had weight, filling the gate until every small sound, the click of a suitcase handle, the cough of a stranger, felt magnified. It was poetic, in a way. The woman who had lived by whispers now crushed beneath the sound of her own quiet. I walked back to my seat. Same row of chairs, same carry-on, same view of the runway, but everything had shifted by degrees. The seat no longer felt like waiting. It felt like arrival. A little girl sitting across from me tugged on her mother's sleeve, her eyes round and curious. "Mom," she whispered, "is that the lady they just said on the speaker?" Her mother looked at me, then back at her daughter, and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, I think it is." The girl smiled, small and shy. The mother's gaze lingered a second longer, and for the first time that morning, someone looked at me not with suspicion, not with pity, but with respect. Quiet recognition. The kind that says, "You earned this." I exhaled. A long, measured breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Jessa moved to the far end of the terminal. Her heels clicked unevenly this time. She stopped near the departure board, pretending to read it, though her eyes were unfocused. Her phone trembled in her hand, the screen lighting up every few seconds with new notifications. I knew that look, the frantic scramble for control after it's already gone. Then my phone buzzed. A single text message slid into view. "Andrew, well played, proud of you." No emojis, no fluff, just words heavy with meaning. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply. Then I locked it and set the phone face down. I didn't need to respond. Not yet. Because while the room had gone still, my mind had drifted backward, years back, to my first month at Borden. I could still see it, the dim break room lights, the smell of burnt coffee, the echo of a dozen overworked analysts trying to look awake. We had just finished a brutal quarter, routes delayed, staff slashed, morale somewhere below freezing. I'd been there late one night, hunched over spreadsheets when Jessa, back when she was still a friend, leaned against the doorframe with that trademark smirk. "Women like us don't get ahead quietly," she said. "You either make noise or they step on your spine." At the time, I'd taken it as encouragement, a call to solidarity. I'd thought she meant we should fight for space together, raise our voices, refuse to be drowned out. But that wasn't what she meant. Now, sitting under the fluorescent airport light, her words rewrote themselves. She hadn't meant fight together. She'd meant fight to be the one with the mic, even if it meant standing on someone else's neck. But I hadn't made noise. I had done something she'd never understand. I'd waited, watched, documented, turned patience into strategy. Every slight, every rumor, every smirk. I'd recorded it, filed it away, not out of spite, but out of survival. I'd built my truth quietly, one fact at a time, until it became a trap with her name on it, and she had walked straight into it, wearing heels too high and a lie too loud. The gate agent walked past and paused in front of me, a folded slip of paper in her hand. "Ms. Clark?" she said, smiling. I stood, nodded. She handed it over. "Updated seating for you." The slip was crisp, freshly printed, seat 2A, first class. Leather seat, aisle access, champagne before takeoff. I looked down the boarding list and saw Jessa's name, 24B. Middle seat, economy. between a toddler and a man holding a bag of pretzels like a prize. Fitting. When they called pre-boarding, I stood slowly. The terminal buzzed again, people rustling to line up. I walked past Jessa's row without slowing. Her eyes met mine for a second, just long enough for me to see the storm behind them. But I didn't stop. No anger, no gloating, no satisfaction, just completion. The quiet closing of a chapter that had been bleeding ink for too long. The first-class cabin smelled faintly of citrus and leather. Soft music played overhead. The seats gleamed, cool and smooth beneath my hands as I sat down. The flight attendant, a woman around my age, smiled as she checked my ticket. "Borden Logistics, huh?" she said, glancing at the logo beside my name. "Big deal. Congratulations." I smiled back. "Thank you." She handed me a warm towel. The kind that makes you realize how tense your hands have been. I pressed it to my palms, closed my eyes, and let the warmth settle into my skin. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I let myself breathe without defense. It wasn't about the seat, not really. It wasn't even about proving Jessa wrong. It was about reclaiming the version of myself that believed quiet competence could still be powerful. That believed patience wasn't weakness. That believed truth, handled carefully, could still win. Outside the window, the runway shimmered in heat. Baggage carts moved like clockwork pieces across the tarmac, orange vests glinting in the sun. A world in motion, perfectly timed, just as I'd always loved it. I opened my laptop and waited for it to wake up. The screen reflected the faint glow of cabin light. I pulled up my mentorship presentation, the same one I'd spent countless nights refining, tweaking, rewriting. The title slide stared back at me. Supply Chain Innovation Metrics. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted the words, each one vanishing with a quiet click. In their place, I typed a new title. Rewriting Roots, The Quiet Power of Clarity. It felt right. Outside, a ground crew member lifted a hand, signaling the pilot. Engines hummed to life, deep and steady. Passengers shuffled in behind me, the murmur of boarding filling the cabin. I could almost sense the gate fading behind me, the whispers dissolving, the lie unraveling. Through the reflection in my laptop screen, I caught a final glimpse of the concourse behind the glass. Jessa, standing near the jet bridge entrance, her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale and tight. A woman now cornered by her own narrative. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate was loud, messy, consuming. What I felt was quieter, something closer to distance, the kind of distance you earn when you stop trying to be understood. As the plane began to taxi, the seatbelt light blinked overhead. I leaned back, hands folded, eyes half closed. The hum of the engines filled the silence that once belonged to her voice. And in that moment, under that soft cabin light, I understood something simple but enormous. I wasn't escaping a rumor. I was shedding an old version of myself. The one that waited for approval. The one that believed being noticed mattered more than being right. This time, I wasn't running. I was rising. And somewhere behind me, she couldn't follow. Phoenix heat felt like standing in front of a hairdryer that never shut off. The air itself seemed baked, so dry it burned the inside of my nose when I breathed. Even the sunlight looked exhausted, white, sharp, unforgiving. By the time the taxi pulled into the circular drive of the Hyatt Grand, my lips had already cracked. I could taste salt on them from the recycled air of the plane and the desert dryness waiting outside. The hotel lobby greeted me with a rush of cold, over-conditioned air. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and new leather. Every sound bounced off marble floors, heels clicking, laughter restrained, name badges brushing against tailored blazers. The mentorship conference was already underway. I could see the check-in tables across the atrium, banners announcing National Logistics Leadership Week in sleek metallic letters. I didn't rush to the desk. I stood still for a moment beneath the marble archway, the kind that made you feel small on purpose, watching clusters of women gather near registration. Some were older, gray streaks in their hair, crisp blazers, quiet authority. Some were barely out of college. Bright eyes, nervous smiles, clutching portfolios like life rafts. All of them had worked to be here. All of them carried stories of long hours and late nights. Unseen effort turned into polished poise. None of them knew mine. The conference hum was different from the office hum. Here, ambition didn't hide. It shimmered in perfumed trails and practiced laughter. The kind of environment where confidence was currency and posture was language. Then, during the kickoff panel that afternoon, I heard my name. Borden Logistics Southeast Division sends a standout this year, the host announced, her voice smooth over the microphone. Someone who streamlined over 70 rural distribution routes and helped save the company tens of thousands during Q3 storm season. Please welcome Leanna Clark. For a heartbeat, there was that suspended pause, the one before applause decides to begin. Then hands came together, soft but steady. Not viral, not explosive, just real. The kind of applause that meant earned. I walked onto the stage, the bright lights washing everything into a blur of gold and white. My palms didn't sweat. My heart didn't race. It was calm, almost peaceful. After the session, a woman from the Midwest cohort, Dana, approached me. Late 30s maybe, with freckles and a voice that carried quiet authority. "They've been whispering about your report," she said, smiling. "Said it's the cleanest data visualization they've seen in years." I laughed softly. "I didn't think anyone actually read it that closely." "They do," she said, tapping her coffee cup against mine. "When you don't scream." That sentence stuck with me longer than she probably meant it to. We had coffee that night in the hotel lounge, both of us too wired to sleep. We talked about logistics software, about burnout, about what it meant to lead without shouting. By the end of the evening, it felt like a beginning. 3 sessions later, we were already sketching a cross-regional proposal on a hotel notepad. Emergency. Reroute protocols that could save millions during storm seasons. But through the panels, the networking mixers, and the late-night study groups, there was something else that followed me. Not the heavy silence I'd known at the airport. This one was lighter, weightless. The silence that comes after a long-held breath finally leaves your chest. For the first time in years, I could think without defense, speak without flinching. It was freedom in the quietest form, until the text came. It was the 3rd morning of the conference. I was in my room, hair half dried, name badge still hanging around my neck. My phone buzzed once. "Manager, you need to be aware. Jess has filed an HR claim. Says you used private materials to humiliate her at the airport. Wants a review." I stared at the screen. The message didn't surprise me. Not really. People like her don't stop when they lose. They reframe the battlefield. The press packet with my face on it lay across the desk, the hotel's sunlight glinting off the glossy print. My name, the company logo, the tagline. Empowering the future of logistics. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't panic. Instead, I opened my personal laptop and navigated to a folder I'd created months ago. It was labeled Prevention. Inside, it lived everything. Organized, dated, airtight. The emails, the timestamps, the laminated certificate, even a notarized letter from Borden's communications head, confirming the pre-scheduled release of the fellowship announcement that had appeared at Gate C12. Every receipt of truth, ready for deployment. I attached the files to a single email addressed to HR, wrote 2 words, "For reference," and hit send. No explanations, no emotion, just evidence. Then I closed the laptop, exhaled, and went downstairs for coffee. 10 hours later, while I sat in a workshop on sustainable logistics, my phone vibrated again. HR liaison. "Thank you for the documentation. Based on evidence, no further action required. Claim dismissed." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering above the reply button, then simply locked the screen. That night, I slept with the window cracked open. Warm desert wind swept into the room, carrying the sound of distant traffic, low, steady, alive, the smell of asphalt and faint orange blossoms. It wasn't celebration that kept me awake. It was something gentler, relief, the realization that she could keep trying and it wouldn't matter anymore. I was insulated. Not by anger, by truth. The final day of the conference arrived with desert light spilling through sheer curtains. Everyone gathered for the closing luncheon. The room was filled with easy laughter now, the collective exhale after a week of proving ourselves. When they announced a peer-voted spotlight award, I half listened, sipping water. They described someone who demonstrated quiet leadership, clarity in chaos, and measurable impact. And then I heard it. My name. Applause again, soft and genuine. I hadn't campaigned, hadn't performed, hadn't even expected. But sometimes recognition arrives when you've stopped chasing it. As I stood at the podium, the microphone's red light blinked to life. Faces blurred into a sea of color and light. I spoke slowly, carefully. When people try to discredit you, I began. Sometimes the best response isn't louder, it's longer. Let the facts build weight over time. Let your work echo after their words collapse. The room was still. Someone somewhere shifted in their chair, and I could feel curiosity rising like static. Someone was wondering who I meant. Maybe everyone was. But I didn't name her. I didn't have to. The real power wasn't in the exposure. It was in the distance, the space between what they did to you and how you rise anyway. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned. I found a quiet corner near the lobby bar, ordered a glass of soda over ice, and let the condensation cool my fingers. The marble floors gleamed under the evening light. The conference banners were being taken down. The hum of voices faded into a comfortable blur. Then my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. You think you won, but people talk. Don't get too comfortable. No name, no profile image. But I didn't need one. I knew the rhythm of that threat, the desperate punctuation, the need to be heard, even from the shadows. I stared at the screen for 5 slow seconds. Then I hit block. No anger, no reply, no proof of receipt, because some echoes don't deserve an answer. They deserve the emptiness they created. And as I sat there, glass sweating against my hand, I realized the silence that surrounded me wasn't the kind that follows destruction. It was the kind that grows after reclamation. I didn't need to erase her voice. I just needed to stop giving it a stage. Outside, Phoenix shimmered under a copper sunset. Cars drifted down the highway like sparks. Somewhere, a storm of dust was building over the horizon, but it looked beautiful from here. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for peace to arrive. I already had it. The return flight was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache or echo, but settles over you like a blanket fresh from the dryer. Warm, earned, undeserved in all the best ways. It wasn't the silence that fills your head after humiliation or anger. It was the kind that comes when the world finally stops asking you to defend yourself. Phoenix to Nashville. 4 hours. Window seat. The hum of the engines blended into a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. I didn't open my laptop, didn't check emails, didn't think about route data or project plans or how I'd phrase my next presentation. For the first time in years, I let the screen stay black. Instead, I watched the sky. The light shifted in slow gradients, pink to gold to gray. The clouds below looked like cotton folded over secrets, soft enough to land on, endless as forgiveness. Somewhere in that floating quiet, I caught myself smiling, small, real. I thought about how much of my life had been spent landing on knives, calling it progress. Now, for once, it felt like I might be allowed to land somewhere soft. When the plane began its descent, the captain's voice broke through the calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach to Nashville International. Local time is 5:43 p.m. I looked out the window as the world grew closer. The sun hit the runway like a flare. The city stretched beneath us, familiar and distant at once. Parking lots, billboards, office parks that looked like circuit boards from above. The landing gear dropped. A soft thud, a small jolt, a quiet ending. We touched down. Smooth. Final. The terminal was crowded. Different gate this time, different terminal, but somehow the same rhythm. That low buzz of people between destinations, The smell of cinnamon pretzels curling through the air like memory, rolling suitcases, tired faces, the chatter of arrivals and departures. I walked slower than usual, letting the crowd move around me. Each sound felt like an echo of something I'd already lived. The airport no longer felt like a stage. It was just a place again. And then I saw her, Jessa, standing near baggage claim, hair pulled back, posture tight enough to snap. She wore that same leather carry-on slung over one shoulder, the one she used to brag about. Italian, not outlet, she'd say, as if luxury could rewrite integrity. She didn't see me at first, or maybe she did. Hard to tell. Her phone was in her hand, but she wasn't typing. Her thumb hovered above the screen, frozen mid-scroll. She looked smaller than I remembered, deflated, like someone who had spent too long pretending the air around her was applause. I didn't stop walking. The air between us was heavy, filled with things neither of us would ever say. But in her stillness, I could read everything. The way her jaw clenched, the way her eyes flicked toward me, then away, then back again. She knew. HR had dismissed her claim. Corporate had circulated the report. The narrative had shifted. People weren't whispering about me anymore. They were whispering about her. In offices, in calls, in quiet hallways, her name now meant caution. Not charm, not confidence, just consequence. She was no longer the voice people turned toward. She had become the noise they avoided. I passed her without a glance. No eye contact, no nod, just the rhythm of footsteps on polished floor. Every step felt lighter. The automatic doors opened to the parking garage, releasing a rush of warm Tennessee air. It wrapped around me, humid, sticky, alive. The sun had started to sink behind the downtown skyline, bleeding orange into the metal frames of parked cars. As I walked toward my spot, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd left behind in that company. The girl who apologized before finishing a thought. The woman who double-checked her neckline before walking into a meeting. The employee who stayed late, calling it loyalty when it was really fear of being seen as replaceable. They were gone. Not erased, just finally put to rest. I drove home with the windows cracked, the air thick and warm against my skin. The highway lights flickered on one by one, chasing the sunset west. I didn't turn on the radio. The sound of wind was enough. When I reached my apartment, the sky had turned the deep blue of a quiet night. I unpacked slowly, set my suitcase by the door, hung the lanyard from the conference on the hook beside my keys, slid the small glass award they'd given me onto the middle shelf of my bookcase. It caught the light from the kitchen lamp and glowed faintly, steady as a heartbeat. Then I reached for the folder, the one that had followed me like armor. The laminated certificate, the emails, the notarized statements, the receipts of every truth I had once needed to defend myself. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and tucked it away. Not hidden, just done, because it had already served its purpose. For years, I'd carried evidence like a shield, ready to prove I belonged wherever I stood. That night, I realized belonging doesn't come from proof. It comes from peace. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my blinds, painting stripes across the floor. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. Andrew, HQ wants you to speak at the Fall Summit. Title's yours. Anything you want. I stared at the message for a long time, watching the cursor blink on the empty reply field. Then I typed back slowly, the words appearing one by one. Me. Let's call it this. The lie that sat at Gate C12. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before hitting send. That was the title. The truth, wrapped in quiet clarity. Not an exposé, not revenge, just the story of what happens when you stop fighting noise and start letting the facts speak. The email whooshed away. I leaned back in my chair, sunlight brushing across my face, and felt something rare and steady take its place inside me. Closure. Not the cinematic kind, the real kind. The kind that doesn't arrive with applause, but with quiet understanding that you've already won because you no longer care who notices. She tried to ruin my reputation. So I let the truth ruin her illusion. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to chase justice down. I just needed to stand still long enough for it to catch up. Outside, the neighborhood stirred. Dogs barking, sprinklers starting, the faint rumble of morning traffic. Life continuing. And somewhere across town, maybe in a different office or another airport gate, she would hear my name again, not as a target, not as gossip, but as a speaker at a summit she would never be invited to attend. I smiled. Not cruelly, just peacefully, because revenge wasn't the point. Clarity was, and clarity finally was mine. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.